Hey, we're back. It's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And you're watching the M Squared TechCast and MITechNews.TV.
Yep. And we have with us once again, who has been a constant guest of ours, because he's the man that understands what's going on where no one else seems to, Fred Brown. And Fred is an infectious disease expert, works with a number of states and countries, affiliated through Johns Hopkins, got all the great credentials. And we hear stuff from him that we're typically not, I'm not hearing, I don't know about you, Matt, but I'm not hearing it from anybody else other than Fred's kind of giving us the real story here. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's a pleasure.
Let's talk about a couple of things. You mentioned that the virus now we've discovered is smart, and the antibody testing and the vaccines, it's outwitting some of these things. Yes.
Yes, it's sort of interesting. It turns out sugars play a big role. And what we found out, well, a couple things. We've known for a while that viruses have special devices to avoid the immune system. And the SARS-2 virus, this COVID-19, is especially good at it. When we were studying HIV a few years ago, we noticed it had genes to create 4 extra proteins. And we were wondering, why does it have genes to create 4 extra proteins? And the reason it has it, these are called open reading frames on the virus. These ORFs, they code for this different protein. And what the HIV virus will do is it'll shoot out 4 different kinds of proteins that then distract our immune system from what it should be going after, which is the actual virus itself. So the virus will go out, and create these different proteins, and our immune system will get confused. We've got 2 kinds of immune systems. The first immune system we have is a lymphoid immune system, and that's what we hear about with the beta interferon and the T cells, and we get our antibodies are stimulated, and we try to hit the virus before it hits the cell. So that's the lymphoid system. Then we have a myeloid system. So once the virus actually enters the cell, that's when you hear about the cytokine response. And that kills the virus once it gets into the cell. So we have an exterior one and an interior one. And what's different about the SARS viruses, it actually has ways of deflecting both immune systems. So our first immune system, like I said, when we studied HIV, it had a way of deflecting the lymphoid system. It would shoot out 4 different proteins, and then it would go ahead and attack our cells, because our virus was our immune system was what they called muted. We were so busy following these other proteins around that we missed the big one, and that's exactly what SARS does. We've identified something called the ORF3b. It's an open reading frame, and then we number them 3, 4, 5, 6. This is ORF3b, and ORF3b is particularly good at the SARS virus, is particularly good at creating a protein that distracts our cells, our immune system, lymphoid cells. And so what happens is we don't respond as much as we should to the attack. We're busy fighting off other proteins that confuse our immune system. So when we finally do hit the cytokine system, which attacks the virus once it hit the cell, the cytokine system says, oh my gosh, we have a lot more than we were anticipating. We should have been killing off a lot more of this stuff than we did. So it suddenly shuts on what they call a cytokine of super, it tends to go overboard. And so now it mutes, so what the viruses do cleverly is they mute one side of our immune system, and they force us to over-respond in the other side. And so you're seeing a lot of deaths as a result of this over-response. That's the cytokine storm on the one hand, and a lot of extra infection and heavy viral load that we wouldn't expect on the other hand. So it's a particularly tricky virus, it turns out.
I'm amazed. I just had no idea viruses were as intelligent, smart, what do you want to call them, as they apparently seem to be, right? It's just amazing.
What's interesting is that these are just such simple, tiny organisms. They don't even have DNA in them. They only have RNA. And it's just, if you understand, it's my assumption, at least from evolution, that this is just blind luck. There just happens to be one of them that can do this. And so more of that kind of virus will reproduce, right? That's how it works.
We select for it, absolutely. And and our concern is that we actually have a vaccine or a drug, we're going to start selecting for even, we find out that there are 3 different ORF3bs. One of them is particularly virulent, and we're concerned that if we do it wrong, we're going to select for this particularly virulent one, and it could really hurt us badly. I mean, we're talking about, people who die very rapidly as a result of having this particular one in their body. So it's
that's why you have to be so careful in vaccine development, right?
Yes, we can sometimes we can sometimes help the vaccine, help the virus by mistake. That's very unfortunate when that occurs. We've had that happen with one of our one vaccine that we did about 20 years ago, and it turned out to be very damaging. But we're hoping it won't happen this time.
Another thing that you mentioned in your talking points was blood type. O or A seems to be a factor.
That's right. That's right. So we've known this for a little bit of time. We've known this with the SARS virus. What happens with the virus is that the virus is very sugar coated. It's glycoproteinated, they call it. So they have all these glycans or sugars that are attached to the virus, and it turns out that one of the sugars one of its primary focus of attack is the ACE2 receptor on our cells. Right next to the A2 receptor on our cells is the sugars that we create. It's as I recall, it's on the other one, gene 3. But we create sugars that actually type our blood. So the reason that we have a type A, type B, type O blood is because of sugars that are on the proteins of the blood. And these sugars then have a response. They have the antigen, and so you'll have a response. If you're O, you'll have antibodies to both the A and the B variants. If you're type and so on. So what they found in a couple of different studies, which is interesting, they found in China, in France, and then most recently with 23andMe, they actually looked at 750,000 different results of people having COVID and having their blood type, and they found that people with type A blood actually were at a higher risk of dying from a bad response and being more infected than those with type O blood. And we think, now we don't know everything yet, but we think the reason for that is that that the type O will have the antibody to these sugars that are encapsulating this, especially the spike protein of the virus. And so we will actually, the type O's, I'm a type O. So we're going to attack the virus more than people with type A, because the type A will have a similar type of sugar coating on it that fools us into thinking.
Were the other 2 blood types B and AB?
That's right. B, A, B.
Was there anything involving them in this, or is it just type A and O that they studied?
So far, we've only looked at A and O. We believe that the same thing is going to be true about B, and if it's true about A and B, it'll probably be even worse for the ABs. Now, the ABs, of course, are fairly rare, as is B, but A's and O's are pretty marked. Now, it's about a 9 to 19% improvement according to 23andMe. So 9 to 18%. And the truth is that it's a smaller secondary effect. It's not going to be something that you should go and say, I'm a type O, I'm all set. I'm going to go out there and not wear my mask and so on. No, don't do that. But if you're a doctor and, if your doctor says, I've got some bad news, you've got COVID and you're admitted to the hospital, the doctors will probably be watching you much more carefully because that's where it really starts to become life and death.
All right. Fred, we've reached a point in Michigan where we kind of seem to be at this plateau. I've been looking at the numbers, like 200 new cases a day and roughly 20 deaths a day. Is that what you think we can continue to expect going forward, or is it going to gradually go down even from that?
We don't know. There are a couple of different factors that we're not sure about so far. The first is we're pretty sure about the social distancing. So the social distancing, we know that if we go ahead and socially distance, we're going to reduce the number of infections generally overall across all of Europe, and we've done the studies around by about 30%. So that's a big factor, right? That's a big infection factor. And we also know that we're going to reduce the R by quite a bit. If we can get the R below 1, then in fact we should actually reduce. Right, the reproductive level of 1 means you infect 1 for every 1 that's there. That's a break even. Every time you get infected, you'll have 1 more created. That's a break even. When you get below 1, then you're starting to beat the virus, and then you can start to beat the virus back. So if we're able to socially distance sufficiently, hygiene sufficiently, and especially if we're able to get a drug or a vaccine, at that point, we'll really be able to beat back the virus and get below R1. But we have a long way to go. What we're doing is we're starting to get to an equilibrium in most places where we've socially distanced, and that's in the East and the upper Midwest, where we're doing pretty well. We're keeping the virus at bay. Unfortunately, the southern states and the western states are having a lot of trouble right now. I don't know if you've been looking at the news, but Florida's going overboard. Texas has had 3 straight days of world record numbers. South Carolina's not doing very well, and those were the states, unfortunately, that opened up early and didn't socially distance probably as much as some of the other states. So we're seeing some of those effects in the West. Also, Arizona, California, starting to come back a little bit as well. And now, of course, you find out that China's coming back, and that's the one that really scares people, because China's about 8 weeks ahead of us. And what happened? Wuhan had that big outbreak, and then Beijing was really carefully sheltering and trying to avoid getting any virus into Beijing. They were really worried about that because Beijing's tight. Now they found the virus in Beijing. And despite all their efforts, they found 79 cases in the last couple of days of new COVID cases that they can't really trace. It's all traced back to a market, in a fresh market in Beijing. But that's worrisome, because it means that even a country that's completely suppressed the virus, understood where all the new viral load was coming from, had a lot of suppression factors in place, still had a rebound. So if they have a rebound, then the risk is that the thinking is, we're going to have one too, because we're not quite as stringent even as they are. They have some real.
Let me ask you something on more of a personal level. My daughter lives in Seattle. My grandson is almost 2. I've only seen him a couple of times. She's really wants me to come out and see him. I am real hesitant about getting in an airplane for 4 or 5 hours with a bunch of strangers and flying to Seattle. And I don't know what to tell her. You're shaking your head, so I think it's probably a bad idea, right?
Yeah, what we're finding more and more, that those long plane trips are really dangerous. There was a lot of Los Angeles turns out to have been seeded by one surgeon who was on a plane from New York, flew across the Atlantic, flew across from a nonstop flight from New York to LA, got there, died 2 days later of COVID, and no one said anything. I mean, nobody knew on the plane that they were infected, and of course that seeded a lot of, apparently it may have seeded a lot of what happened in LA, which is having a big outbreak. So if you're on a plane, can you drive? That would be an option. Can you drive it? 2,000
miles. It's a bit of a drive, So.
Yeah, just a bit.
But it is. But so here's the deal. If you get on the plane, step one is you want to get there safely. So drive your own car. And then, when you get into the plane, it's nice to be able to have all your hand wash all that stuff down, keep it wet. 3 seconds of wetness. It can't dry off. It can't be just a wipe. It's got to be wet. And then, and that means spray everything. The seat belts, it covers the window shades, right? The tray tables, your armrests.
Oh yeah, you can't touch anything.
Whole 9 yards. Wear your gloves, right? Bring your hand sanitizers. Tell the people that you don't want any service. Thank you very much. Sit by a window. If you have to have a choice, when you have people, try to keep at least two rows in front and behind you open. Fly first class. Don't and do it right, because that gives you more social distancing if you can afford it. Check all your bags. Don't screw around with getting up, breathing on people. Exhaling deeply when you're inhaling, when you're rolling your bags in. Check all that crap. Get there, and then the problem is that if you're worried about infecting your granddaughter, you have to wait 14 days, right? Because you don't know. You won't know for at least 5.5 days. You got to wait, as we said last time. You have to wait that long to get diagnosed. Takes you a day and a half to get the cycle done. At that point, it may or may not be correct, but about 80% chance you'll know if it's correct or not. And then you gotta wait all that time. I'd say at least 10 days, give it before you see any symptoms. And then you can see her. But that's a long, so you may as well drive out there, enjoy yourself, drive back, and you'll see her more than you would if you flew.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. I now have ammunition to share with my daughter because I was saying I didn't think it was a good idea. Not to mention that I'm a senior citizen now, so that puts
It's
me in
actually
a
more
high
dangerous
risk
for you.
group. Right?
It's more dangerous for you than it is for your daughter.
Yeah.
Is the truth. Seattle's in pretty good shape. As far as the COVID virus goes, I guess they have some things going on downtown with the protests, but that's happening everywhere. But overall, Washington State is coming up a little bit, but it's not so bad. It's better for them to come visit you.
Yes. I'll talk to her.
No, my son's getting on an airplane next week, but he's only flying to Minneapolis. His environmental consulting company's cleaning up a toxic waste site in Minnesota, and they want him there for 10 days. So
that's about an hour flight or something?
Yeah, hour and 15 minutes. Yeah. So that's not quite as dangerous, I wouldn't think, but I'll be sure to tell him to wait.
Four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life, but LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.